Welcome to the Way of the Dad podcast, where we fearlessly dive into the depths of dadness. If you like what you are hearing, please share the podcast and give it a review on the platform where you listen. Thank you. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's great to have you here, and it is another great day to be a Bengals fan. The curse is broken, and the Bengals are advancing to the divisional round for the first time in 31 years. Just let that simmer in. The curse of, or at least the supposed curse of Bo Jackson, has been broken. 31 years. The last time I saw Bengals win a playoff game, I was roughly 10. That's just bonkers. It was so surreal just watching that happen, and in such an epic fashion. And a lot of that is because I've only ever known heartbreak as a Bengals fan, at least for the extraordinary majority of my life. I'm in my early 40s. And I remember previous times when this is the time. This is when we finally, quote unquote, get over the hump or take the next step or whatever, common little, refrain you want to use. I was actually present for the 2005 wildcard game at Paul Brown Stadium with, of course, the dreaded Steelers being our wildcard opponent. I remember being there. I was actually down at the opposite wasn't quite at the end zone, but I was off kind of catty corner to the end zone in that corner. But it was at the opposite end of the field, and of course, all we saw was this massive, beautiful 60-some-odd yard pass from Palmer to Chris Henry, and then we just all noticed the game seemed to stop. We're like, okay, well, let's go, and no one's going, no one's moving, and people are mulling around at the far end of the field. And then eventually, I'm not going to lie, my heart sank. It just absolutely sank. Because that was when we knew that somebody was hurt down there. And that was like the first play from scrimmage, I think. First two plays, I think. One or two. I cannot remember. And then we figured out it was Palmer. And I'll admit, that stadium was still absolutely phenomenally electric. Just bursting at the edges with crowd noise. It was the loudest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And John Kitna, the backup, he did play pretty out of his mind for the first half. But the inevitable outcome kind of happened. John Kitna became John Kitna. The Steelers defense collected themselves and made adjustments and started attacking him in the way that they knew how to beat him. And they did. And we lost. And then there were the Dalton years. Oh, I'm sorry, the 09 playoff. That was the most boring NFL football team I think I'd ever watched. I mean, it was nice to win, and they won a bunch, sure. Carson Palmer's arm was not right, and it was basically just run and play good defense, which was excellent if this was 1982. But that kind of football just didn't get anywhere. And then the problem is we ended up playing the Jets. We played the exact same kind of football. And unfortunately, they played it better than us that day. And I remember that was cold. I was there. I was freezing. And me and my ex-wife had looked at each other and we said, we're not wasting another dime on season tickets ever again. And we didn't. That was miserable. It was not only miserable, but it was also boring. And it felt inevitable. Especially after about the first quarter and a half, halfway through the second quarter, it was pretty obvious that this team didn't have any juice. It didn't have any gas. Even if we got past this round, it wasn't going anywhere. Of course, we didn't get past that round. And then all the Dalton years, almost every single year, those are the first 5 years in a row we got into the playoffs. But you kind of knew, the first 3 years for sure. It was they got there, but they either didn't even come anywhere near matching up the other team, or by the time they got there, they were decimated and shredded with injuries. But 15 was the notable one out of all those years. Now, Andy Dalton was hurt. A.J. McCarron was playing, but he was playing pretty good. He was playing pretty good in Dalton's absence. And that team was legitimately good. And just to watch that game going from absolute elation because we had the victory. We had it wrapped up. And then to watch Jeremy Hill fumble. And then on the next drive, Big Ben is rolled out there. Of course, there's the fawning over him and acting like he's just the strongest man ever and so heroic, and he's got a cape on him. And, he's got like a tendon and a half holding a shoulder together, but somehow he's willing his team, the way announcers like to talk. And then Vontaze Burfict goes all Vontaze Burfict and commits the worst penalty at the worst possible time. Helmet to helmet, 15 yards. And of course, the Steelers and the Bengals are getting awfully chippy at each other. And then Pac-Man Jones contributes another penalty. And then we basically help them march themselves down the field. And then they end up winning. And in the span of 5 minutes, watching a team that looked like they had it won, it was wrapped up. It was done. It was over. All Jeremy Hill had to do was just run it and not fumble. And he couldn't even do that. And it felt so Bengals, especially of the Marvin Lewis era. But not last night, baby. Last night was like new who day, who this. Last night was very different. The coaching staff has felt different. This has been a really interesting year to watch. It's been interesting to watch Zach Taylor and the rest of the coaching staff grow and get better and learn from their mistakes and generally not repeat them. The stadium was packed. It was electric. Absolutely packed to the gills. I guess it set a new record for attendance. The team, they were cool. They were calm. They were collected. They were poised. No one that I noticed looked like they had stars in their eyes. They looked like they were out there, and this was just another football game. I'm going to give some props to the Raiders. They were a worthy opponent. That team, you want to talk about stuff that teams have been through this year. I don't know if there's a team in the NFL that's been through more tragedy, drama, and all internal, some self-inflicted. I mean, their coach ends up having to quit mid-year from really old emails that were private and somehow got out into the open. Of course, interesting that only his emails got out in the open. His emails, however many they were, out of a collection of couple 100,000 emails. I don't know how only his found their way out, but I digress. I'm not a big John Gruden fan to begin with, but it did feel like that was an outcome that was desired by somebody. But the Raiders are a worthy opponent. They fought through thick and thin, probably overachieved a little bit, but I'll give them credit. They deserved to be there last night. That was not a fluke. They didn't back in. They earned the right to be on that field last night, and they were a very, very worthy opponent. And they gave the Bengals all they could handle. I mean, that was like watching one of those really good boxing fights where no one's being surgical. There's just punches being thrown. I'll punch you and you punch me and just punch back. And, it looked like we had the Raiders on the ropes for a little bit, and then, you know what? They bounced off. They found a little life. They just kept punching back. No matter how much we punched them, they kept punching back. Heck, they even had us on the ropes near the end. And what amazing historical game wouldn't be that way without a couple controversies. So I'm going to talk about the one that everybody's going to talk about, and some of these talking head pundits are going to talk about. But I'm also going to talk about the one that I don't think anybody's going to talk about. And it almost felt like, honestly, it almost felt like in that way that sometimes you think the refs are making up for a bad call by throwing a terrible call against the other team eventually, trying to even it out. So the first one's the errant whistle. And that's the term, with air quotes there, errant whistle. So Joe Burrow, this is the touchdown to Tyler Boyd. Burrow is rolling out to his right. I mean, he's making a beeline for the sideline, but he's still looking downfield. And he finds Tyler Boyd. And it's one of those plays that's just, it's gorgeous to watch. It's one of those like all-time classic plays where you see a quarterback do something amazing and you see the wide receiver connection with the quarterback, and it just turns out to be a beautiful thing. Joe Burrow is throwing the ball, and he has not touched down out of bounds yet. He's like basically hopped up, and of course this is all the worst possible quarterback mechanics for throwing a ball. But it's the last heave-ho effort type thing. He's running, and he's right at the boundary, and he hops up, throws the ball while in the air, and then, of course, lands out of bounds. And then a ref blows the whistle, only looking at when Burrow's feet hit out of bounds, not paying attention to the ball in the air, not paying attention to the fact that the play is still live. Now, I know the rules, heard all the explanations, and I get it. But that ref made a terrible mistake blowing a whistle when it should not have been blown. And I think, personally, between the refs on the field and the ones in their ears from New York, I think they all got together and they just made the right call, even though they're not admitting the ref made an egregious error. But I think they made the right call in how the game was going, because the play wasn't actually dead. The other controversy is the non-timeout timeout. Now, of course, as any good make-up terrible call, this goes around to the other way. This went against the Bengals. If I remember correctly, I believe this was fourth quarter, and the Bengals were on defense, Raiders on offense. Or no, I'm sorry, Bengals were on offense, Raiders were on defense. And I guess they caught them with 12 men on the field, basically. They hadn't quite shifted out yet. And right as pretty much right before Burrow gets the ball snapped, one of the Raiders players, one of the cornerbacks or DBs was signaling for a timeout. And he did signal for a timeout before the play was snapped. But the refs didn't call the timeout. They just retroactively decided that they were going to call the timeout even after the play had already been snapped and run. And it was a good play. It was a good advancement, if I remember correctly. And it really just stalled and killed the drive. I think at that point, the Bengals looked like they were probably going to put up another 7. But, hey, what's a big game without some controversies, right? Of course, as the game went on, offense came out firing and, looking great. It's kind of weird because the Bengals did something that's kind of the opposite of what they normally do. Normally, the Bengals are a little bit more of a second half, or at least second quarter to second half team. And this time they came out firing. And then they sputtered in the second half. And the offense clearly sputtered. Something the Raiders were doing defensively was bottling them up better. It was making it harder for Joe to find someone open. They were getting home, from a pass rush perspective. The Raiders' D was getting home a little bit more often, or putting at least more pressure on Joe. The defense in the second half, there's kind of heroics there in a way, because they were literally depleted. They didn't have any more D linemen. We didn't have any more pass rushers. We didn't have any more defensive tackles. The ones you saw out there, the ones that were out there the whole time. There was no rotations, no getting guys rest or breaks or anything. And of course, the Raiders were making good progress against the defense because they're gassed. And definitely not our best pass rushers out there. Not our best pressure guys in the middle. But Jermaine Pratt, when it absolutely needed to happen, comes up huge with a pick right in front of the goal line. I'm pretty sure that was like the 1 or the 2. Steps in front of the coverage, picks that puppy off, and seals the game. Bengals win. It's just hard to believe. As a lifelong, long-time suffering Bengals fan, you feel like, okay, where's the flag at? Where's the thing that's going to come by and nullify this? Where's the whether it's the refs or whether it's someone on defense someone on the team making a boneheaded penalty, where's the other shoe going to drop? How is somebody going to take this away from us? And they didn't, because that was it. So as happy as we were, me and my buddy, Dave, we were just watching, and as happy as we were, we're also just watching the TV, waiting for that little flag, yellow flag thing to come up. Something, anything, I know that in the post-game conference, Zach Taylor said he was giving the game balls, one to Mike Brown for being patient, for being involved in the team and knowing what was going on in the team. I think he said something to the effect of, if he had been a coach in virtually any other team in this league, he wouldn't be employed, because the first 2 years were really not good. But the team wasn't that good. The actual playmakers weren't that good. Not saying you didn't have pieces, but you didn't have a coherent unit, and you were still kind of trying to get rid of the malcontents and the people from the previous Lewis era that didn't like the way Zach Taylor was building things or whatever. But he said he wanted to give a game ball to Mike Brown, and he wanted to give a game ball to the city. I can say something. If I had a game ball to give out, one of the things I would do, I would probably give it to Zach Taylor and the coaching staff. Because as a fan of the Bengals, and of course seeing them through the 90s, that we don't really need to talk about, and seeing the Marvin Lewis years, this year, if I remember correctly, unless something changed, the Bengals were the least penalized team in the NFL. If there is one thing, besides the obvious stuff like Joe Burrow and Trey Hendrickson and Logan Wilson and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, all the names you can name off, right? But if there is one very, very key and vital recipe to success, the success specifically of this year so far, it's the lack of penalties. It's the increased discipline. This is something Marvin Lewis, in all 16 years, seemed to never be able to figure out. There were always false start penalties ruining drives. There were always delay of game penalties. Bad formations. The penalties. And of course, the penalties on defense. Defensive players hitting people in a way they know they can't hit them. Not turning their head on coverage and getting pass interference plays. Just all the time. Either handing the victory to the opponent or, shooting yourself in the foot on the field on offense. That is an accomplishment. And if I were giving out a game ball, I'd be giving it out to Zach Taylor and his staff for doing whatever it is they had to do to get this team disciplined. Because that's a hard thing to do in the NFL. And of course, those penalties hurt the Raiders pretty much all night. There were a lot of penalties on the Raiders. So I'm going to wrap it up, but I can't wait to see who we play next week. I guess there's a decent chance we're going to play Tennessee or Kansas City, I guess. Well, Kansas City if they win. If they don't win, the thing is it's a dynamic bracket. It adjusts based on who wins and who loses. But it'll be interesting to see. But you know what? Tennessee's a great team. KC's a great team. The Bills, gosh, if you watched last night, the Bills absolutely curb stomped the Patriots. They're all great teams. But that's what playoff football's about. So, win or lose, I say give us your best shot. I'm looking forward to playing whoever it is we get. And I think we can find a way to match up. I do hope our defensive players that got hurt last night can come back on the field, get back ready for next weekend. But we'll see. Anyway, that's about it. I'm going to wrap it up. And until next time, take care and have a great day. Thanks for listening. The Way of the Dad podcast is produced and recorded by, well, me, a stunningly average husband and father, who appreciates all of the likes, shares, reviews, and support you give. If you would like to reach out, you can find the podcast on its Facebook page, and of course you can email me at wayofthe.dadpodcast@gmail.com. Come back next time as we continue to fearlessly dive into the depths of dadness.